Bueno, buenos días nuevamente a todos. Gracias por unirse a este último tramo de la maratón. Y es personalmente para mí un placer presentar a Anabela, con quien nos conocimos en un congreso de FAAPI. Esas son las cosas maravillosas eh, que nos regala el trabajo entre todos, el trabajo colaborativo, el conocer otras visiones, más gente, más amigos. Anabella teaches English and Intercultural Studies at Universidad Nacional de La Plata, Universidad Nacional de José C. Paz, Instituto Superior de Formación Docente 97, and Public Secondary Schools. She specializes in university extension, popular education, and intercultural studies. Anabella is also part of the executive committee of FAPI. Welcome, Ana.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you can see what I want you to see. That is the presentation, not the speaker view. Is that correct? Can you
Yes,
see my
perfect.
screen?
Yes,
Perfect.
everything's
Great. Because
perfect.
okay. I cannot see you, but I will manage. If there are any comments in the chat, please interrupt me, or if you want to say anything, just please pick up. The idea is that we generate a conversation, right? So thank you very much, Api Bebe and Api, for inviting me to share this event with you. It's a very valuable and important event for all of us, and I enjoyed deeply. So thank you once again. I will thank Kari especially for all the logistics. And so this is my presentation for today. I chose the title Exploring Interculturality and Intersectionality for a Context-Appropriate Approach to Comprehensive Sexuality Education. And I will present ideas both on how to implement comprehensive sexuality education at schools and in non-formal contexts of education, because that is where I'm putting a lot of energy right now, and I feel like sharing and speaking about the project everywhere. So this is the agenda for today. The introduction and comprehensive sexuality education would be very brief because we have been listening for colleagues speaking about this in all the different sessions, and I'm pretty sure teachers here are aware of these laws and legislation. I want to take a look into Latin American critical pedagogies because I find some connections with comprehensive sexuality education that I find interesting, and I think that it's about time we, as English teachers, take a look at what has been produced also here in Latin America regarding education, not only Europe or other contexts. Then I will delve a little bit more into intersectionality and interculturality. I will speak about Educación Intercultural Bilingüe, that is the program in Argentina. And of course, because that's what I love, I will talk about intercultural literature, and I will share our experience in Puente Entre Lenguas to help you find materials, ideas, tasks on how to implement comprehensive sexuality education through literature using this perspective of Latin American critical pedagogies. Okay, so the 5 axes of, wait, this is not working. Okay, there. The 5 axes of comprehensive sexuality education. We have been listening and sharing about them a lot. We know that they have been thought of almost 20 years ago, but still we see that sometimes we struggle to work with all of them or to work with a comprehensive approach like the one Pamela was talking about. So I think we always need to go back to our legislation, to our documents. There are a lot of articles written specifically for teachers of English. For example, Silvana Cardo, she's the teacher behind Hello SE. She publishes a lot on this topic among other colleagues. So it's good to always go back to, as Pamela was saying, look into things with a different perspective or revise what new element or what new side we can add to our teaching, right? But as I was telling you, I've been working with popular education, educación popular, and Latin American critical pedagogies for a long time. That was the first time I entered a space with a role similar to a teacher or a tutor, even before knowing or being able to put a label to this. Um, and so this has always been something that has been part of my teaching style of how I think of my students and the classroom. And because of this marathon of this event, I was thinking, okay, is there anything that I can connect to comprehensive sexuality education in order to talk about um, critical pedagogies? And I think so. We're going to delve, as I told you, into intersectionality and interculturality. But the starting point is that both concepts uh, are, have at their core the idea of education as a political project, right? Education is not naive and does not escape social conflicts, rather address them. And so talking about both popular education and sexuality education, we can say that there are no bodies that are right or wrong. There are no fixed identities that we can be forced into. And so when we enter a classroom, be it a school or a non-formal context of education and working with young learners, children, and adolescents, we should strive to achieve social justice for them, helping them get access to rights, because we are state agents when we are at school, and probably if we're working in non-formal context of education, we are people who can link those communities to state agents who will provide the guide or the help they need, right? So at the core of both concepts is this idea of empowering young people to name their realities, to ask questions, to build healthier and freer relationships with others, but also with themselves, right? Um, let's move into intersectionality first, yes. There was a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, and it's a concept that is used to understand how different aspects of a person's identity overlap. For example, race, gender, class, sexuality, ability, age. And that overlapping creates a unique experience of either privilege or discrimination. This term was coined in order to analyze how Black women were excluded from white feminism in the United States in the 80s. And it's useful to use this lens to think about how complex our identities are, and how, for example, a girl is not only a girl, but she might be a migrant girl who does not speak Spanish as her mother tongue, or she comes from a um, different context. So talking about a binary opposition between the gender genders might not be enough in order to address inequalities and discrimination between or among children, right? I also tried to include in each slide some resources that I think that can be useful for you. So in this case, a couple of months ago, I had the privilege of attending IATEFL, that is the International Conference for Teachers of English. And there I got to know Giovanni Licata, an Italian teacher who has been working for some years with a project called The Unpublished. And with this, he intends of sorry, he intends to visualize those identities who do not appear in teaching materials, in textbooks, in lesson plans, or in the classroom even. It's a very interesting project, and if you go to see their website and their Padlet, there are a lot of resources that I think are really interesting to use, to share, and to analyze in order to plan our own classes. At the end of the presentation, you will find the link with the references, right? So talking about intersectionality or closing this topic, as teachers who work, as we said, permanently with comprehensive sexuality education, we should address these layers, identities, and this approach helps us a lot to do so, right? Because we are integrating the 5 axes as Pamela presented just some minutes ago. Let's move into interculturality. I chose some extracts from this book, which is a wonderful book published here in Argentina that you can find in many places, even buy it online, written by a group of professionals, and is part of a project led by Josefina Navarro, which is CSE in Quechua. She's my Quechua teacher, and she's great. And she has published a lot, not only this book, but other materials, articles, workshops on how to integrate comprehensive sexuality education in intercultural contexts. Because we need to address this fact that our children, especially in public schools or in non-formal contexts of education, come from an intercultural background. So we cannot assume that their life experiences are the same or are similar to ours, or to or are even among themselves, right? We know that there are a lot of cultural differences, and that is what makes our culture as an Argentinian culture or Latin American cultures flourish, right? And we need to know those differences and those particularities in order to fully integrate everyone into society and be understanding of others. So in the first part of this book, Josefina and her team talk about racism as a historical system that organizes society, and they present the relationship between racism and education, saying that education and the educational system has deemed as less important certain knowledges, cultural practices, and identities that have to do with the Aboriginal peoples in Latin America because of our colonial past, right? And they make a connection between race and gender, taking into account Rita Segato's work. And she presents that those two categories, race and gender, have been used to legitimize social inequalities, right? Who is the person in power? Probably not only is he a man, but he's a white man. Probably he comes from the upper layers of society in terms of economic power, right? So their analysis is really interesting, and I fully recommend this book because it's it's great even for when we think about planning, writing our year syllabus. It has concepts that are very clear and very um, well presented. It's a great introduction to some of these ideas. And then I also want to talk about thinking about formal context of education, thinking about teaching at schools or teacher trainings, about everything that has been um, developed from our ministries or former Ministry of Education, right? The National Education Act includes this special modality of bilingual intercultural education, especially for those areas in our country where we observe that different cultures live together, and this idea of interculturality is very much needed in order to reach all of the students at school and address the importance of um, teaching in their languages and respecting their cultures and their identities. So our former National Ministry of Education produced a lot of material since 2004, when it was the first time that this idea was presented. And these materials are uh, so far they're still online. We don't know what will happen because you know that a lot of changes have been made since we no longer have a Ministry of Education at a national level, and some materials are disappearing from our reach. So I recommend that you go and look for everything that might call your attention and download it and share it and take a look at it. There are some stories, like, for example, Quien apaga las estrellas, about being Mapuche and Argentinian. There are some materials regarding history or geography, music. There are videos, um, cartoons, and there's this book with all the documentation of the different projects that for almost 20 years um, have been part of different provincial ministries of education and have been compiled by our former National Ministry of Education. And I work and live in the province of Buenos Aires currently. So I thought of sharing with you also these areas of our provincial Ministry of Education, because probably we're not so used to um, going to visit these pages when we think about planning materials, and they have a lot of material. Well, Pamela shared some material on CSE. We have our Dirección de Educación Sexual Integral at the province level of Buenos Aires, where you have a lot of documents, books. You have material that was written during the pandemic and is still available online. And this other area, probably you don't know about, and it's wonderful. Even I don't know a lot about them. I have been learning about that dirección since last year, and they have great materials. La Dirección de Psicología Comunitaria y Pedagogía Social. They work not necessarily in schools, but in other institutions or places where children go after school or before school to complement their education with activities, pedagogical activities of different kinds. And there you will find interesting documentation, not only for working with comprehensive sexuality education, but also literacy and, for example, the use of technology, a lot of different materials that we are, again, as I mentioned before, we're not used to looking for in this area because probably we don't know that it exists, and they are wonderful. They are very good materials, and of course they are written in Spanish, but we can use them to translate them and adapt them as materials for our English language classroom. I will share later when we talk about literature some of the ideas I thought of from these two series. Both were produced during the pandemic for helping families with their children, working with literacy mainly, but not only. The series Leer y Escribir el Mundo was published by the province of Buenos Aires, and the series Educación Comunitaria was published by the former National Ministry of Education. It was a great project that I only knew about when it was about to close a couple of years ago. And you can find great things on, for example, environmental education, identity, comprehensive sexuality education in general. It's wonderful to work, for example, at primary level. So you get a lot of ideas there. And the idea with this talk was to tell you how we have been integrating all these materials for our workshops. Here in La Plata, where I live now, I lead an extension project, a university community service project that is called Puente Entre Lenguas, in which we teach English and we learned Guarani, for example, and we use Spanish also to promote the use and of all the languages that the community in La Plata where we work speak. We work with children through intercultural literature, because I love this idea by Claire Crumbs that literature develops the imagination. So you get wonderful ideas and wonderful reflections from children by using literature. And so I will tell you now how we integrate some of the materials from the programs I shared before with some books from different origins that present different aspects of comprehensive sexuality education. So this is our first example. I took these very short introductions from the series by the province of Buenos Aires, in which they teach these booklets. They are booklets meant to be worked in community service projects or in non-formal contexts of education. They were printed and published during the pandemic for also families who needed help teaching their children how to read and write. And the first one is about names, it's about identity. And you see different characters that talk about the origin of their names, how they were chosen by their parents or by themselves. And I thought that we can link those materials and those discussions with a very beautiful story called Chrysanthemum. That is, I have them here actually. I will show them to you. This is a lovely children's book in which this little mouse is bullied because of her name. She's named Chrysanthemum, and her classmates make fun of her because of her name. And of course, it has a really happy and emotional ending because it's a children's story. And when we were, this was the first the first workshop that we taught when we started Puente Entre Lenguas. This was a recommendation by, I don't know if it was Mercedes Pérez Verbain or Agustina Laporta or both, but they helped me a lot with our first workshop. And we thought that we wanted to start talking about names, and it was a great start. So we read the story in English, and then we debated in Spanish about names, how our names were chosen, or if we chose our own names for any reason. Um, and the first thing that we taught them in English, our children, was to introduce themselves in English. So it's the logic is very similar to this literacy project that I'm telling you about of these vignettes in Spanish. Another hot topic when we talk about comprehensive sexuality education with little children is the family. And for example, the family book by Todd Parr is a classic, I would say, for sharing diverse families, right? But in this book, which is lovely and I love it and children love it, we don't have any specific context. We don't know where their families are from. We don't know anything about them in particular rather than what they like or what they do, but there are no specific cultural elements to them. So we can always adapt or expand the reading in order to include some culturally relevant information that can let our students identify with the families, with the characters, and with the stories we share. And that's why I chose to work with this other material again from this series about families in Spanish to adapt it and to start some discussion on what constitutes a family, who are your family, and this idea that we can actually we can talk about families in a book, but we can also look around our own families and see how diverse they are. Uh, so again, I think that the combination of both materials is wonderful. And if we are working with young learners, with little children, we need to address certain discussions in Spanish because that is the language that they can express better or feel more comfortable. You know that the mother tongue is closer to our heart. And so they will feel, even if they have a good level of English, they will feel comfortable, I mean, in schools or other contexts, discussing in Spanish certain topics. And if you have the chance of knowing other languages, or if you ask them to name the members of the family in other languages they may know, such as Quechua or Guarani, it magic occurs, and we have a wonderful class in which we are all learning and sharing at the same time. Um, the next book I want to talk about is a recent discovery that I got because we are working hard a lot with environmental education. That is something that is required of us at schools. as Pamela introduced, but it's also relevant in our context in Puente Entre Lenguas because the neighborhood in which we work is a place in where there are a lot of vegetable gardens in the family's backyards, and we are trying to build our own behind our escuelita where we teach. So last year, at the end of the year, we started reading a book that is called The Gigantic Turnip, that is a Russian traditional folk tale, and they loved it. And after that, we built our vegetable garden, and you can see the poster over there in the back. And when we designed the poster, they wanted to include the vegetables or the food that appeared in that story, but we also discussed a lot about what is grown in our gardens at home. And they brought a lot of ideas, and they know a lot about that because their families take care of their own vegetable gardens at home, and they know what time of the year each vegetable grows and how to take care of the crop and everything. And it was wonderful. And I wanted to keep on working on that because they know a lot and they are really interested about the topic. And I found this book that is called My Baba's Garden, that is about a Polish grandma who is a migrant, again, talking about intersectionality. And so she cooks traditional food in their new country, and that is what links them to their home country. And so she has her garden where she grows her own food, and that helps us thinking about comprehensive sexuality education. It helps us think about gender roles, who cooks, who takes care of the vegetables. That is something that we talk about a lot also because for example, in the Guarani community, where to which most children belong to, um, gender roles, binary roles are very marked. So there are certain things that only the men do, and there are certain other things that only women do. And when I thought of the topic of our presentation, my presentation, and thinking about this context appropriateness, it is really important to understand how these cultures work, not trying to impose our view, which might be much more influenced by Western culture, uh, but be respectful and maybe help our children, um, express themselves how they feel with those gender roles. If there's something that they can think they can do, even though they are not, there are no typical roles for women or for men. For example, in the gardens, the men build the structure with wood and whatever, and then the women take care of the vegetables and the small the little activities, not making a lot of physical effort because that is the men's job. Uh, so being respectful and being understanding of what their families think and how their families divide those roles, we help them reflect and analyze if that is something that should be like that without um, being able to question that idea, if they feel comfortable with it, and presenting again respectfully maybe some alternatives or showing that well, maybe they can choose what activities to do when working with a vegetable garden together, but again, not imposing ideas but making differences, um, like making um, these cultures interact, I would say, and not imposing one idea on or one culture over the other, right? Um, this is another book that I haven't had the chance to use yet, but I'm really looking forward to. That is called The Hula Warrior. I have it here, and I will read the introduction because I think it's really interesting. And of course, it is not about any Latin American girl, but she is a member of the Hawaiian culture. And I will read the introduction so that you see what the story is about. Yes. In ancient Hawaiian culture, every person had a role in society. Mahu, people who embraced both feminine and masculine traits, were valued as healers and as caretakers and teachers of ancient traditions. In Ho'onani, Hula Warriors, we hope to show that, in the spirit of these Hawaiian traditions, we can make room for all people, Kane, Wahine, Mahu, and show every person the same unconditional acceptance and respect. So, this is the story of this hula warrior who doesn't see themselves as a wahine, a girl, or a kane, a boy, and her look for a place in her society. And I loved the story. The moment I saw it, I had to buy it. And I thought that when we work with it in our workshop, it would be interesting to also do some research and talk about other identities which are non-binary and that belong to Latin American Aboriginal groups. I have been studying and doing a little bit of research, but not so much yet. But I found this poster that I found super interesting about all the different identities in different groups. You see that this binary opposition between female and male is Eurocentric and is not and is socially constructed, as Segato said. Um, so we, by analyzing and working with other cultures, we can find different identities, different ways of um, living and experiencing gender that are really enriching in our classrooms. Um, there are two more stories that I thought of sharing because intersectionality and we can see different aspects of specific culture in both of them. One is called Granddad's Pride and is the story of a granddad that was um, very much involved with LGBT rights, especially since he was a young person. So in this story, he tells the story of his youth together with his friends. And it's lovely because talking about intersectionality, we see that not all members of the LGBTQ community are young or do not belong to traditional families. We have here a granddad who is a member of that society and who um, shares his experience with all his family and the diversity of bodies and identities that we find in this book is just absolutely lovely. So this is a lovely book. And the other one, you may know it because again, it's already a classic, I would say, in English language classrooms. something that I find really interesting is that his name is not Julian, as we probably are used to listening. His name is Julian, and he is a boy from a Latin community in the United States. So again, talking about interculturality and intersectionality, we have a very rich character here. And in this story, he's with his abuela, and they meet some mermaids, and then Julian wants to become a mermaid, and they see a parade, and all these beautiful mermaids are enjoying their parade and being happy and free. You can see them here. So again, uh, taking each of any books of these books for our classrooms can lead to a multiplicity of topics and discussions, not only in terms of gender identity, but intersectionality and interculturality are very much present. So we need to address all these aspects of identity that our students probably will identify with. And there's one more that is not actually it's not actually literature. It is a book about cultural diversity. This is, I would say, this is for um probably secondary school. I would use it in secondary school, probably the first years. It's very diverse, but definitely not for younger children because of the complexity of the topics. I loved it because it presents different um cultures, and they talk about discrimination and uh, South Africa, for example, we have Nelson Mandela's profile. But there's something that I loved about it was that we have a profile on Bolivia's Cholitas. So I think it is a great starting point for talking about women and the specific characteristics of these women in this society in Bolivia, in South America. Um, so I think this, for example, this book and all these books can lead to wonderful projects in different classrooms, whether formal or non-formal contexts of education. Um, this was what I wanted to share with you. This is my list of references, and here you have my email address if you want to contact me. And if you follow that QR code, you can find our project on Instagram. And there I am planning on leaving all the slides for you to read again if you want. And we also have a PDF with all these book recommendations and the topics they cover in case you want to explore them. Um, so that's it. I don't know if you want to open your microphones or comment or on anything. I'm all ears. I'd really like to listen to you if you have been using literature or you work with young learners or have um, anything to say about this topic.
Thank you, Anna. Um,
You're welcome. Thank you.
I don't know if anyone wants to tell something. This year I started teaching my granddaughter English
Okay.
in first grade, and I decided to use books to teach her. And I've started with a book called Where's My Baby, in which a mommy monster loses her baby and goes to the police, and there are a lot of different monster babies there. And we talk about being different. So as simple as a silly story, because it is very silly, the police officer presenting a baby and mommy's monster saying, "Oh, my baby's not red, my baby is not hairy, my baby is clean, my baby whatever." But talking about different different babies, different people, and talking about how many babies are lost, and other discussions that with a 6 years old, I never thought I had, but she came up with some ideas. So this working with books is excellent.
It's lovely. You never know what they are going to say or what discussion is going to sparkle. I love working with literature. The project is something that I made catered for the children, but of course with this idea of we will focus on literature. There are many children that do not have access to books at home, especially English books. Who can afford buying English books to their children nowadays? So I think that if we have the chance to include them at school or in other contexts, it really adds a lot to our children's education. Thank you to everyone who has been commenting on the chat. Thank you, Rodrigo, for joining also my other association, because I said that I'm living in Buenos Aires, but I was born and raised in Chubut. So I didn't show this, but this is something I want to work with in secondary school. I got a Mapuche, English, and Spanish dictionary with a lot of information that I want to include. Yes. So again, my two associations, my two provinces. Thank you, Pamela and Sophia and everyone in the chat.